All right, Emma with the king, queen.
And Pesh with the beautiful 9-7 of spades. Does he start mixing in some 3-bets? These are the kind of hands when you're playing deep, you kind of want to have to mix in some 3-bets, especially when you're getting so many folds pre. Certainly what he's thinking of, or he would have already called. But he also might feel more comfortable playing small ball, and that's exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like I don't 3-bet in this spot enough. Whenever I am the second or third stack at a final table against one of the big stacks, I feel like I'm pretty nitty. But maybe that's a mistake. I mean, I don't know. Then again, I would have called and Pesh called, so when I play like Pesh plays, it's probably at least okay. And he did flat this time and gets the nut flop, but this is a board where Emma should not lose her mind too much. Well, now she may.
Baby doll. Huge turn card here for Upeshka De Silva. Certainly could elect to lead. Some check raises maybe. Get those queens to start betting. But he is going to elect to bet, knowing that that queen hits her range a good percentage of the time. On the bigger side, I quite like it. 420 into just over 500,000 chips.
So, Emma's going to call pretty much every time, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people think in the scenario they maybe should raise to try to protect their equity or push the draws out. The problem is that when you do that, when you are
pretty standard stuff so far, but I want to talk about the flop a little bit more to inform us a bit more of Emma's range because of future decisions that we're going to get into. So Emma checks back on the flop. This is like a wet board that favors the big blind. Often good players will check back on boards like this. Some good players will check back 100% of the time, no matter what they have. With a set of 9s, they'll check back. With 8-10, they'll check back on this board. I don't think that's most players, so that's a vast minority, right?
Yeah, I think so. You're usually going to get a lot of action from the big blind on a board like this.
Right.
Sometimes you're going to get check raises. Sometimes you're going to get calls. Of course, you're going to get folds too. But if you have a really big hand deciding to bet right now to build a pot and avoid the million scare cards that can come. By the way, this is a problem for Pesh with his top 2, where a heart, a 10, an 8, a 5 are all big-time scare cards.
A 6, by the way.
Yeah, a 6. That's a good point. They're actually a 9 and 7 also they're good for him, but they can scare off his opponent to the point where it's harder to get paid down the road. Not those so much, the 9 and 7 as much as all the other ones you just said. So there's just a million cards which kill action or kill your hand. You know, you be Pesh and a 10 comes and suddenly you're losing. A heart comes and suddenly you're losing. So if Emma had a really good hand, I'd expect her to bet at least a fair amount of the time here.
Right. So that's going to inform later things. Then we get to the turn. And, of course, Pesh bets. He's probably betting with any sort of equity. He has a range advantage here. And, of course, Emma calls, right? There's nothing else for either of these players to do.
If someone did something other than bet call, I'd be super surprised. I like the Pesh bets as big as he does because the board is so wet. And Emma often has to show downable hand because she checked the flop.
And now she absolutely has to call with a good queen.
Yeah. The thing you have to remember, though, before we even move on with this hand is that Nitrogen Sports Poker is the sponsor of this ad and this video, and they have important things to let you know.
They do. They have a link in our pinned tweet.
It's fascinating.
It brings you to the promised land, Jonathan. That brings you to the sign-up page for Nitrogen Sports. But if you use that link when you do it, you get access to our monthly tournament. It's the greatest iterated value in poker. There are 1,000 buy-ins guaranteed. They cap the player pool at 300. That means it's a damn fine deal.
It's amazing. Get in there, get you some poker. On with the hand.
ever folding.
Oh! Pretty much the second worst card, or the second worst card that Pesh could hit really here. You know, a king, he's going to have to lose a lot of money, but a queen, he might be able to get away. But he is not liking his life here. Interesting to see if he opts to make a sort of smallish, yeah, he's going to do the block bet.
So he bets 225 into a 1.4 million pot. So he bet only 2 big blinds. Typically you want to do this in scenarios where you have 55% equity against your opponent's range, maybe a little bit less.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting sort of metagame stuff with this really small bet. You know, they've been playing together for a few days now. there have been some pots where there have been some smaller bets on the river and some raises from Emma. And maybe Pesh deduces that she won't go for the bluff here. And he's going to be able to find out really easily.
Well, you say that. We know Emma likes to bluff. And there aren't a whole lot of hands that make sense to raise here besides exactly a queen. And to be fair, Emma could have all the queens, right? She would check back flop with ace queen, king queen, queen jack probably. So she could have them. But Pesh is a bit wild, Emma's a bit wild. When you have two wild childs against each other, they inevitably may start hero calling each other. Is there ever a world where Pesh jams? That would be insane to jam here, right? Emma could just have, I mean, could she ever have queen 9? I don't know. Oh, he is going for it, though.
Wow.
Using the 9 and the 7 as blockers. Whenever you do lead tiny on the river like Pesh did, it's important to make sure you do lead with some nut hands small. Not a lot of your range, but a tiny portion of your range. But this is definitely not going to work, I would not think.
Yeah, I don't think this sizing is going to be enough. If he really wants to tell this story, he's going to have to make it so she's going to have to call off half her stack. I think it's obviously a really brilliantly creative play, but he does recognize he's trying to get her to fold a queen, and he's just saying that he has a full house, which is, very hard to have. Also, we do have the 10-8 and the 8-5 to consider, and that's obviously a big consideration. And that's really what he's repping. So I should preface it by saying that. Certainly difficult for him to have a full house when she has a queen. This would be so awesome if it went through.
Even then, he may not raise with pocket 6s. Right? Because she could just have a slow played 9s or 7s or a random queen 9 that decided to play it oddly. And she did not fall for it. I don't think there's any way Emma could concede.
Whoa! That was an escalation.
Yeah.
I would call that an escalation. That was a river 3-bet from Pesh there. Let's go back in time a little bit and talk about just the bet of 225 into 1.4 million. Obviously, Pesh hates this card. Yeah. It's a horrific card. What is he trying to get called by if he's not going to get raised when he bets 225?
I mean, I have to believe he's targeting very weak ranges that are putting him on missed draws. I guess like a 7, a 6, maybe pocket 8s once in a while. Ace high, maybe? I
can't imagine ace high calling. It feels really tough for ace high to call.
I mean,
this
a 6 is like the same thing, and a 7 ain't that different. But
yeah,
he's got to
just use distribution, and ace high is pretty bad.
I mean, you are getting an amazing price, but you kind of assume if Pesh was bluffing, he would bluff a little bigger with his missed draws, right?
You would expect most of the time. Now, Pesh is good enough to sometimes show up with a bluff here, even with this sizing.
That's true.
But the sizing is also probably what leads to Emma raising, because I think if Pesh bet a more normal size, like 750K, 800K, something like that, I don't think Emma could even consider raising with king-queen here, right?
I think it would be a mistake to raise for sure, where you put yourself in, as we like to say, a game theory disaster spot where you're only getting called by better hands. And she could really, maybe queen jack exactly can call if you raise, and queen 10. But there's not too much. We block queens, of course, as Emma. There's just full houses out there. And straights. Why would we put ourselves in that spot? But when Pesh bets 225, like you're saying, I feel like she is obligated to raise a hand this good.
That said, your prospects aren't amazing for getting called by worse hands, even when Pesh sizes it like this. Like, we don't expect that most good players are going to call with a 9. Like, Emma looks like she has a queen, right? It looks almost exactly like what it is.
I mean, if she's got a bluffy rep, then a 9's going to call sometimes. If not, then I think it's just queens that are going to call mostly.
Yeah, so you're just hoping for Pesh to have like a weaker queen and call with that.
Yeah.
Which is thin, but I understand why you would do it when Pesh, you don't want to let Pesh off the hook for 225.
No way.
It's too cheap.
Your hand is way too good, and he does have hands in his range that can absolutely pay this off. I think we should have to raise.
But now here's the interesting thing. If what we said on the flop about Emma is true. Now, we don't know anything about Emma really and how she plays, but this is an assumption that you make generally about a lot of players. If she would have bet a set or a straight or most overpairs on the flop, does she always have a queen when she raises? Like, she doesn't have 9s full if she didn't bet a set of 9s on the flop.
Right.
So Does that mean she just has like queen 10 through ace queen and that's her entire range? That's the entirety of her range here?
I think it's a reasonable guess, at least, or almost always the entirety of her range. How about that? 90% of her range is a queen, and she's got a few, very, very few, very strong checkbacks on the flop, perhaps. Nothing to really be afraid of, basically, if you're Pesh. And if that was the case, that might inform him deciding to go for this kind of crazy seeming 3-bet here.
Well, it's fold or raise if you make that assessment. If you decide, okay, Emma's got, we only say queen 10 and queen jack because the sizing by Pesh was so small. We don't expect you would ever raise those hands most of the time if Pesh sized it any bigger, right?
Right.
Yeah. So let's assume just for a second, for the sake of argument, that Pesh is putting Emma on queen 10 through ace queen as her range, which I think is a reasonable assumption with what we've seen so far, right?
I agree completely.
Obviously, he can't call.
No.
Folding seems like plan A, though, right? Folding should be plan A.
I would be pretty interested in folding my hand I'd be like, that was unlucky. I'm out,
But Pesh is Pesh, man, and he doesn't like that. He doesn't like that idea. What Pesh wants to do is recognize his range advantage, and Pesh has done nothing so far in the hand other than his small sizing on the river to indicate that he has anything but strength, right? He could easily have the nuts here. He could have queen 9.
Yeah, he could. One of the nice things for him, too, is we were talking about him eliminating strong hands from Emma's range. He has a 7 and a 9, which, of course, blocks pocket 7s, blocks pocket 9s, blocks queen 9, blocks queen 7.
Yeah, those are good things.
So that's really helpful when you're deciding to put her on a range, too, right?
Right. So Pesh is basically saying, we decided on our podcast, that he probably has 5-8 plus.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And he could easily have any of those hands as played. Now, maybe Emma didn't think he could have those hands when he bet 225 on the river, but it's Pesh. You got to give him a little nuance to his game. And once he 3-bets, clearly you have to put those back in his range.
Yep.
So he has actually a lot of value that he's repping. Now, what he must recognize when he does this is that Emma's hand inherently blocks that value because he's putting her on a queen when he makes this play, right? He's not putting her on a full house and making this play, and he's not putting her on a weaker hand than a 9 and making this play. So he's putting her on a queen, right?
Yeah.
So that means he knows that she blocks a lot of his full houses, and he's doing it anyway. He still has plenty of full houses in his range. He probably has 6s full, 7s full, and 9s full in his range, along with the remaining queen 9, queen 6, and queen 7s, right?
Yeah, I mean, he has less 9s full, I think, because he's going to sometimes 3-bet that. And maybe some of the other pocket pairs too. But yes, he certainly still has those in his range, no doubt.
All of this to say he's telling a reputable story.
It's got to be terrifying if you're Emma.
Right.
You can see why she tanks here, right?
So how do you make this decision if you're Emma? For the sake of argument, let's say we're Emma, and we know that our range is actually queen 10 through ace queen. That's the entirety of our range. Which hands are we calling with? Because we can't fold them all.
Right. Well, okay. Ace queen and queen 10 are the two best hands we can have, right? Ace queen is by rank the best hand. It's the best queen. Queen 10 is great because it blocks 8-10, which feels key here.
Yes.
Right? So those are two excellent, excellent things. Now we have king queen, and besides that, there's king queen and queen jack. King queen without a club or heart in it seems like, so no king of clubs, no king of hearts, seems like the next best hand. There's two combos of that.
Right.
Then we're on to where we are right now, I think, with king of clubs and the king of hearts. I think that's still probably better than the queen jacks.
You could argue either way.
You could argue. Yeah,
So-
maybe it's the other way.
So this falls somewhere in the middle of the hands.
Like closer to the bottom.
Closer to the bottom. This falls somewhere in the middle of the not auto call hands.
Yeah, okay.
Basically is what I mean by that. So I guess then it comes down to who you're against, because I think against most players, even ace queen is a fold here. Like against most players who aren't Upeshka De Silva.
I mean, someone who doesn't have like 3-bet bluffs on the river, like kind of a thing after betting tiny, which a lot of players don't. Very few players have that. This is just a fold, and that's that.
But it's Upeshka De Silva, and he has more bluffs than most players in the world. I've seen it personally, and you've seen it on TV. It's everywhere. He loves doing it. So king queen feels like a fold in general, but maybe against Pesh this is correct. What do you think?
Well, I think that is a big part of it. I think the other thing that we should not ignore is the price we're getting, especially when we're up against a guy like Pesh, who's going to be all over the place in different ways. We don't have to be right that often, at least, right? Like we're getting it's like 1.5 million to win something like 4 million. That helps anyway, right? So if you throw that in the hopper, you throw the fact that Pesh can be very bluffy and can really show up with almost anything at any time. It feels like almost the way Bryn Kenny can.
Yeah.
If he's got a blocker, he's going to be there, like putting pressure on you, right? That makes me want to call with a hand this good. But I will say, I'm aware I can beat no value, and a big part, all my atoms and all my cells are going to be like, you really need to fold this though, bro. You're just going to call and you're always going to lose, which is what Pesh is counting on, I guess.
Well, can't count on it this time. Emma finds the call.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely unsure if it's good, but it can't be that bad against Pesh.
That sounds right. So really the most interesting part of this whole hand has got to be Pesh's decisions on the river. Right? I guess Emma's got an interesting decision too, ultimately. But Pesh's decision to bet 225K, very unusual. What's his true intention there? It's a little unclear to us. We have some guesses, of course. Then Pesh deciding to go for it even after he very clearly is putting Emma on a queen. Wow. How about that? Do you like these plays? Do you think these are good? I know they didn't work out this time, but do you think ultimately these are good plays? They might be great plays. He's a very good player. And then finally, of course, Emma's decision to ultimately call here with the king-queen. It's a very good hand. It's not super high up in her range, though, in distribution at this point. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments.
Also, check out our book. It's How Can He Fold? Incredible poker hands broken down decision by decision. We did 37 tournament hands, high-quality analysis, fun banter, worth a read, education, fun, all the things that the kids like these days, you know?
Doyle says it's better than going poo on the toilet.
He said that. He did say that.
Yeah.
I think that he definitely said that.
But
Also,
Doyle who?
that's a good question. That's a good question. Because we might get sued if we didn't say Doyle
You
who.
have to cut that out, I think.
I think we're gonna leave it in, and we're also gonna tell you about our podcast, the Breakdown Poker Podcast with the Poker Guys. You can get it anywhere you get your podcasts. You get more jokes like that. You get more references like that. That's how you learn about poker right there. Is about Doyle and all that stuff. Anyway, we'll see you there.